Good evening, I'm Tanner Burke. I'm a mathematician by day, and by night I'm your personal tour guide through the stars. Come with me as we investigate what is and what is not possible when it comes to extraterrestrials. Sit tight and get ready. It's time to watch the skies. As always, the content on this program is based on your questions and comments, so if there is something you would like to see or know, make sure to check out our social media pages. You can like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and join us on Community. Now, let's begin with the show, with a little segment I like to call Breaking News in the Universe. It was an exciting week for our friends at Unicore. In our first big story, some unusual electromagnetic activity was detected at the edge of the heliosphere, the boundary that separates our galaxy from interstellar space. Such activity has not been observed since the Voyager 1 spacecraft passed through it back in 2013. Unicore has not yet declared what the cause of the activity was, but did issue a statement saying, "We are monitoring the situation. There is no reason to speculate as of yet that this is any cause for alarm." And in our other big story this week, the existence of the gravity wave and its quantum counterpart, the graviton, have been made official. For the first time ever, these gravity waves have been directly observed, making gravity no longer just a theory. Joining us later in the program via satellite to tell us more about the implications of this will be none other than Dr. Gene Stigler, one of the researchers on that team that made the discovery. But first, I am delighted to report that I have the company of tonight of an in-studio guest, one I'm told has quite an interesting perspective on alien life. Unlike our previous guests this season, our guest tonight is not a scientist or a skeptic or even a UFO enthusiast. Nope. For the first time ever, we have an actual alien abductee in our midst, and not just any alien abductee, but one who claims to have been abducted not once, not twice, but 3 times. Here he is. Could you please introduce yourself?
Hello, Tanner. My name is Jordan Reeves.
Now, don't adjust your TV sets just yet. That sound you just heard indicates that what Jordan is saying was a lie. To provide credibility to his incredible story and to contain his identity, Jordan has agreed to conduct this interview while hooked up to a polygraph test. Everything that he says will be immediately evaluated and rated orally. Every time you hear this sound, means that he's telling a lie. Whenever he tells the truth, you will hear this sound. Make sense, Jordan?
That sounds fair, Tanner.
All right, glad to hear it. Now, Jordan, I'd like to begin our conversation on a personal note. I'm curious as to how people respond when you tell them that you're an abductee.
Well, that's kind of funny because I've actually never told anyone this before, so I haven't gotten any feedback on it.
Interesting. Well, then I'm curious to hear how you might respond to our first fan question tonight. Jimmy Days on Facebook says, "I do believe in aliens and alien abduction, but I think that people who claim to have been abducted more than once are liars, just looking for attention." Do you agree or disagree? Harsh words, I know, but what do you say to that?
Really, I've got not much to say to that. I would just hope that people could hear my side before they decided to judge me is all.
Well said, Jordan. You'll have an opportunity to tell your story in a moment, but first, Jimmy's question got me thinking about alien abductions and probability. And I came up with an answer based on that idea. We'll be right back after this. The phrase low odds is not synonymous with the term impossible, or even, dare I say, improbable. Let me show you. Contained within this jar are 1,000 pieces of paper, all labeled between the numbers of 1 and 1,000. Now, let me reach in and grab one. 872. Let me write that down before I forget. Now, what I just did may not seem all that extraordinary to you, but the odds of me selecting this specific number are actually pretty low. 1 in 1,000 to be exact, or 0.1%. Now, if I select another number, this time 326, the odds are once again 1 in 1,000. Now, if I just keep picking numbers at random over and over again without adding any or taking any away, the odds will always be 1 in 1,000. But if I stop looking at each individual draw and start looking at it more as a sequence, I can ask myself a new question. What are the odds that the next number I draw will be 326 yet again? Well, paradoxically, the odds actually are not 1 in 1,000, but more of 1 in a million. Now, if I continue to draw numbers into perpetuity, eventually I will draw 2 identical numbers consecutively. And the odds of this happening are actually 100%. Let me show you. What if this next number isn't? 863. Seemingly improbable events become mathematical certainties in the face of infinity. Unconvinced by that statement? Let me give you some real-world examples to change your mind. Consider the lottery. The odds of winning that are catastrophically low, way below 1 in 1,000, and yet the odds of somebody somewhere winning are 100%. But what are the odds of someone winning the lottery repeatedly? Well, it depends. When Evelyn Adams won her second lottery in 1986, the odds were calculated at about 1 in 17 trillion. The odds were 1 in 23 trillion when couple Angelo and Maria Galena won twice in the same day in 2002. History is full of examples of people winning the lottery more than once, which suddenly makes claims of alien abduction seem not all that unlikely at all. With Earth at its current population, the odds of someone being abducted at all are a paltry 1 in 8 billion. This, of course, assumes that all abductions are inherently random and that every person shares the same risk. But there's not enough data out there for us to know if this is the case. It could just as well be that abductees are selected based on specific attributes they possess, such as gender, height, weight, age, so on and so forth. So what started as a 1 in 8 billion chance for all could very well be a 0% chance for some and a 100% chance for others. We simply do not have enough information to know for sure. So, in the absence of hard scientific data, I believe that we must gather as much anecdotal evidence as we can. We should not criticize or dismiss those who claim to have been abducted, even if such encounters didn't happen for a reason. They are all but guaranteed mathematically. Welcome back. Now, Jordan, what do you think about my answer to Jimmy's question? Do you think that you were taken for a reason, or do you think it was all just a coincidence?
This has obviously had a huge impact on my life. I'd have to say, after thinking about it as much as I have, there's no doubt in my mind, really, that it happened for a reason.
No doubts at all, Jordan?
No, Tanner, none at all.
And why are you so certain about this?
Tanner, when I was abducted, they showed me things. They showed me incredible things. They told me things that set me on a special path.
Interesting. Like how so? What happened the first time they took you, Jordan?
Well, first time I went, it was they just took me up and they just showed me Earth from space.
Maybe they pushed the wrong button. Could you say that again for me, Jordan?
Oh yeah, Tanner, not a problem. When I went up into space the first time, they just showed me Earth, and
Jordan?
There must be something wrong with this machine. I don't.
I can assure you, Jordan, the polygraph's working fine. Why is it that you're not telling me the truth on this?
I am telling you the truth, Tanner.
What happened when they took you? It's okay. You can tell me. Your identity is being protected. Can you not say? What about the second time they took you? Okay, I think maybe it's best that we move on for now. Let's take a quick break and answer one of your questions. Bobby Joe from Community says, from Community,
They told me to get on the show, all right?
excuse me?
They only took me once. They told me to get on the show any way I could, and instead of being taken up those times, I kind of made it up and just hoped that you'd pick me.
Whoa, Jordan? Are we still live? What's going on? It appears as though we had a little bit of a power surge here in the studio, folks. Sorry about that. And it appears that Jordan has left the set during it. While we look for him, why don't we get back to Bobby Joe's question. He asks, how can you say you believe aliens are real when we've never even seen one? Well, thank you for your question. Not to give anything away, but I will be giving a sort of mathy answer to this question later on in the show. But for now, let's take a look at what producer Nick Weaver has to say.
Hey, how you doing? My name's Nick. Man, introductions can be tough. Without a mutual party to kick things off, I mean, how do you present yourself? How do you distill your personality, your history, your essence into a brief greeting? Every detail of the presentation has to be considered, from the tone of your voice to the clothing you wear. I mean, it's just exhausting thinking about it. But that's nothing compared to having to do it for the entire human race. 50 years ago, a team at NASA did just that. To an audience of hypothetical extraterrestrials, they culled together a potpourri of images and audio, and they put all this onto 2 golden phonographic records. And the records were placed onto 2 probes, named Voyager 1 and Voyager 2. These probes were sent into space to study planets Jupiter through Neptune, which they did, but at a speed of 35,000 miles per hour and no brakes. It wasn't long before they flew past them completely. Eventually, Voyager 1, the further of the 2, exited the solar system altogether, but before it did, it took one last image. Here it is. Don't see anything? If you look very carefully, in the center of the sunbeam on the right, you will find a tiny blue speck. Still can't quite find it? That's okay. Here it is. The little blue dot is Earth. This image was taken in 1990, when Voyager 1 was 4 billion miles away from home. Now, at the time, no alien life had been discovered. 37 years has passed since then, and Voyager 1 is 17 billion miles away. It's not even in our galaxy anymore. And still, as far as we know, no alien life has been discovered. Perhaps at some point along its route through interstellar space, it will come across extraterrestrial life. The sad truth is that we will never know for sure. We lost contact with the probe 2 years ago. 48 years into its mission, the generators on Voyager 1 finally died. Voyager's failure to discover alien life does not deter my belief that we are not alone in this universe. I'm just as convinced as ever that there are aliens out there and they have made contact with us. But the story of Voyager does expose major holes in the way we traditionally think of extraterrestrials. Now consider this. If there are aliens out there, like us, searching for life, the odds that they find us on this tiny blue speck seem remote at best. The biggest problem with the extraterrestrial hypothesis is that it assumes that aliens travel linearly through space, going straight from point A to point B. So if aliens were to come from, say, Alpha Centauri, the nearest star system to us, the fastest route between us and their homeworld would be a straight line nearly 26 trillion miles long. But there's a shorter route. Now, the fastest way to get between 2 points in space is to simply eliminate the space between them. Fantastic concept, I know, but one that does not violate Einstein's theory of relativity. Now imagine this paper is space, and the 2 circles are Earth and an alien planet. If aliens were capable of folding space, creating a tunnel between their world and ours, Their presence here could be so brief, their appearance is so random, that we would have no way of ever detecting them. Sooner or later, the golden records will encounter alien life after voyages many trillions of miles long, an enormous distance by conventional standards, a small step by others.
Welcome back. We got a lot of great questions during the break on our social media pages wondering what happened to Jordan. Our search is still underway, but we will bring him back on once we find him to conclude our interview. But in the meantime, I am pleased to report that joining me all the way from snowy Switzerland is none other than astrophysicist Dr. Gene Stigler. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today, Gene.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Now, Gene, did you get a chance to watch that last package?
I did, yes. I thought it was interesting.
I was wondering, before we get into the news of your discovery, could you lend us your perspective on what Nick told us?
Sure. There's actually a lot of overlap between what he was saying near the end there and the research we're doing. He's absolutely right. The notion of bending space does sound like something straight out of a sci-fi movie. But we think that it's not only theoretically possible, we think that we've already done it.
I'm not sure I understand what you're saying. I'm sorry. I guess, could you start with what the overlap is?
The million-dollar word that Nick came close to saying but never quite did was gravity. Now, gravity is this really mysterious force that we still don't, even now, quite understand. We know it's one of the 4 fundamental forces that basically holds the universe intact, and we know from Einstein that it's the curvature of space and time. That last point is really something that you need to understand if you want to see how Nick's proposal could be possible. And does that make sense, or shall I delve into it a little further?
If you don't mind, could you delve into it just a little bit more?
I think it was John Miller who summed up Einstein's theory of relativity by saying something along the lines of, matter tells space how to curve, space tells matter how to move. What this basically means is that everything with mass exhibits a gravitational pull. So you and I both, just by sitting here, are bending space so that things move toward us. It's just that the force of our gravity is so weak compared to the Earth's that we don't notice it. The higher the mass you go, the stronger the gravity, and therefore the stronger the bending of space and time. There's a reason why black holes are so popular among sci-fi writers. It's because black holes have so much mass that we think that if you were to go through one, you would end up in a totally different place in a completely different time.
Interesting. And you say you think that you've already done this?
Absolutely. It's obviously hard to know for sure because we can't directly observe it happening, but based off of our indirect observations, it seems as though that's what we've done.
Why do you think this? What exactly did you guys do, and how does it relate to the gravity wave?
It's very much related to the gravity wave. I guess I can talk a little bit about that first. The main reason why gravity, until now, has been considered just a theory is because for a long time, it was impossible to directly observe it. And the reason for that is that here on Earth, the force of gravity remains pretty much constant. In order to observe gravity, you would have to have some sort of massive shift in its force, kind of like that adage about putting a frog in a pot of boiling water. If you take the frog from room temperature straight to boiling, it will jump out. If you let it sit in the water and slowly turn up the heat, it will stay put. We can't really study gravity directly until there's some major gravitational event.
So how did you create this?
Well, really, the only way to do it artificially is to create a black hole, which is exactly what we did. It's not that difficult to do. All it requires is a large enough particle collider with sufficiently high speeds.
And this is somehow safe?
People tend to get really worried when scientists do stuff like this, but really, there is no danger in it at all. We're not creating any big monster black holes that will suck all of us into them. These are all pretty tiny. They die out after just a few seconds before they have a chance to eat anything major.
Okay, so if they all die out before they can eat anything, what makes you think that they're actually capable of sending things through space and time?
Well, the technology doesn't exist yet to send matter through, but we have observed disappearances of subatomic particles.
So what you're saying is you're sending protons and electrons through it?
Well, yes, but not just those. I think you'll like this. The stuff we've noticed disappearing is electromagnetic radiation, which includes TV signals.
So what you're saying then is if I really wanted to, I could maybe send this show through time?
Well, sure, there's no way of knowing where it might end up, but yeah, it's a fun thought. Theoretically, as long as the place it arrived at had a means of receiving the message, there's no reason to think that people from the past couldn't watch shows from the future, or that people from the future couldn't watch shows from their distant past.
Huh. That is quite an interesting idea there, Doctor. Oh, we okay? We still live? Okay. Well, I'm terribly sorry, Dr. Stigler. I'm sorry to you folks at home. But it looks like in the surge, we did lose our connection with Dr. Stigler. We'll see if we can reestablish, and it looks like Jordan's returned, which is good. While we get him prepared for the rest of our interview, why don't we take a look at one final question. This one comes from Twitter user Carlos Garcia. He asks, aliens, good or evil? Here comes that mathy question I was telling you about earlier. I will get into the question of whether or not aliens are good or bad in a moment, but first I want you to think back to the experiment I did earlier in the show. During that experiment, I drew numbers and recorded them into this notebook, and as you can see, I drew a lot of them. I was looking for a consecutive repeat of any particular number, and eventually I found it. But if we broaden our perspective and look at the sequence as a whole, we can start to find some rather interesting things. Entire numerical sequences are repeated. For instance, the string of 2, 52, 930, 755 are repeated not once, but twice in the notebook. And if I were to keep on drawing numbers, those sequences would appear again and again. And while you think about that, just consider this. This is the periodic table of elements. Of the 118 elements that currently make it up, only 98 are known to be found in nature. And that means that everything that exists, you, me, Earth, the sun, and everything beyond, is made up of a precise combination of at most 98 ingredients. Now think about this. If the universe is infinite, then just like the jar experiment, we will see repeats in the arrangement of their atoms because even though the total possible arrangement of the atoms is very large, well beyond our ability to comprehend, it is ultimately finite, which in an infinite universe means that those arrangements have to repeat. So what does this mean? Well, for one, it means that if you travel far enough, eventually you will find another Earth, complete with another version of you. And if you travel even further, you'll find yet another, and another, and another, infinitely many times. For another, it means that for anything you can possibly imagine, there's likely a potential arrangement of atoms that will allow for it, which means that mathematically it would be very surprising if there weren't both good aliens and bad ones, and that they too wouldn't exist infinitely many times over. Welcome back. Normally these next few minutes would involve me giving my final thoughts on the topics discussed today, but I'm going to forego that for this episode so that I may wrap up my discussions with Jordan and Dr. Stigler. Now, Jordan, what happened during that power surge earlier? Where did you go?
It's just going to sound crazy.
That's okay. Just tell us what happened. The polygraph will back you up.
I didn't go anywhere by my choice. I was taken.
By the aliens? What did they do, Jordan?
Well, they're not aliens necessarily, they're us.
What do you mean they're us?
I mean, I was wrong. I wasn't abducted by aliens. I never was. I was taken by people from the future. I know they said something about an instrument. They had some sort of space and time-bending device.
They're bending space and time. So what Dr. Stigler said might be possible is indeed possible?
Jordan, what else did they tell you? Did they explain to you how the device worked?
No, there wasn't any time. They can't really stay in one place for too long.
And why not?
Well, because it's not safe. If they don't keep moving, then the aliens will find them and they'll capture them, and then after that...
Whoa. Hold on, Jordan. What aliens?
Well, yeah, they wanted me to relay something to you. I didn't really understand what they were talking about. Something about aliens learning about us by finding a gold CD in space and coming to Earth to enslave us all. The people who took me said they escaped and they've been living underground, but that might not last much longer. They said that they needed me to come on this show so that people could see an abduction firsthand. They convinced me that we needed to start preparing for this invasion.
And how long do we have, Jordan?
Well, they said the invasion happens in 2030, so I'd say 3 years from now.
That's not a whole lot of time. Doctor, if this is all true, we'll need more time to prepare. Correct? Doctor?
Yes, Tanner. What are you thinking?
Well, I'm thinking that we may need to test out this black hole of yours.
You mean send a message through it?
Not just a message. I'm talking about this entire program. Let's send the show through time.
But we don't know if it will end up in the right place. For all we know, it could end up 12 years in the future.
Or it could end up 12 years in the past, and that's a chance that I'm willing to take if it means the survival of the human race. But let's open this up to discussion to the viewers at home. We are on Facebook, Twitter, and Community, so sound off your opinions there. Should we attempt to send this episode of Watch the Skies through time, or should we just wait and gather more information? Let us know. That's unfortunately all the time we have for this week's program. Make sure to tune in next week for the season finale of Watch the Skies. I would like to thank my guests, Jordan and Dr. Stigler, one last time before we head out. Until next time, this is Tanner Burke, and good night.